Naam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We thank Allah Jalla wa ala first and foremost. It's for Him that we are allowed to, come together. And we thank our co-hosts here at the Fajr Club. We're on episode 9. This is your host, one of the co-hosts. One of the hosts is Nafis Abu Zaid. And I'm here with my other two co-hosts.
This is your brother Aqil Ingram.
And this is your brother Abdul Haq Baker.
You are now. And this episode, inshallah ta'ala, will be a continuation of last week's episode, which in terms is still on that third stage, I think borderline fourth stage. And this third stage, we're still, by the permission of Allah ta'ala, going into it. So we went into some of the issues and challenges of parenthood. This time we're going to discuss more in detail, inshallah ta'ala, some solutions for good parenting. Some solutions that can be used for parents to adopt. Not saying that we have all of the answers, but hopefully we can discuss these solutions in the present on a real current time to see how it actually can work and help us combat some of the different things that we find ourselves challenged with, especially parents in today's age, or today's climate rather. Inshallah ta'ala, if any one of you brothers want to start, Duhaq or Akil Ingram, let best be.
If you don't mind, Brother Akil, I'll jump in just to set the stage, as it were. Looking that in this season, we've been discussing my cognitive development framework. And I think that as we've discussed, we're at the adult stage, which is one of actualization and key, the first stage of reflection. Because when you look at the framework that I devised and the model that I adapted from altogether different field, you'll see there's no reflective stage from the founding stage 1, to the youthful stage, both of them being idealistic and abstract in understanding. You're just hype, you're just moving forward, you've got no time to reflect because you're on the dean, there's everything, exuberance and everything. But when you hit that adult stage, you start reflecting because of life experiences. You start reflecting because you're realizing that you might be hitting your head against a wall in the environment that you're in. You may be having conflicts in some relationships that take place. You might realize that you are understanding things in an abstract manner and the contextualized manner that you've adapted from age, experiences, traveling to Muslim countries, whatever the case may be, is such that you need to reflect on those earlier stages and readjust in some areas. Many of us didn't have to readjust when it came to Tawheed and the foundations of Tawheed and understanding what the Sunnah was and where we take our sources of legislation and everything like that. We didn't need to readjust that, but we needed to understand how to contextualize that now as a actualized paradigm as opposed to an abstract one. So coming to where we are now, if we are doing that at our adult stage, there's an element or a degree of self-awareness now. And it's important as a parent, and we very seldom do that. I include myself at whatever stage I'm at, adult or mature stage. We seldom self-reflect on ourselves before we deal with instructing, nurturing, inculcating our children. So what we end up doing is perpetuating a cycle of what we were used to from our parents onto our children who don't understand it because it's alien to them. Yet we're telling them, and I do this, we're telling them, this is how I was brought up. This is the boundaries that I followed. These things are like you're talking about Star Wars to them or something alien. They do not recognize it in the world that they're in now. So we need to self-reflect from that youthful stage 2, to the adult stage on ourselves first and foremost, so that we're not throwing onto our children any trauma, any negativity, or any habits that we feel are positive that we are still grappling with or haven't dealt with ourselves, therefore transposing things onto our children. If we don't do that at this stage, and it's something I'm self-learning but now, if we don't do that at this particular stage, how are we going to give solutions to our children? How are we going to parent them when we haven't dealt with our own self-parenting issues beforehand?
Akil, real quick, I just wanted to touch on a point that you brought earlier about that the thing about raising our children up and then giving them what we have learned. But this is the way I was brought up. It's interesting that you brought that up because when it comes in the Quran, Allah talks about those holding on to the beliefs of their forefathers, right? And then He speaks about it in a madmoom way because of the things their forefathers was committing, like shirk, even though it wasn't right guidance. But when He goes to the contrast and speaks about the prophets and what they do for their children, the advice that they leave their children, He doesn't harper on the things that the father was brought up on, as far as living in the dunya, but more so on the
Yeah.
beliefs.
Right.
When you quoted last week about Yaqub saying to his children, "Okay, what are you going to worship after me?" That's what you hold on as a legacy with the forefathers, as far as their belief system, the spiritual system, as far as what you're saying, what we are used to. Well, my mom did it this way, my father did it this way. This is the way I was brought up. This is the way you're going to be brought up, and I do that. I do that as well, and I find myself regurgitating that, and that might necessarily be the right thing. So that's why I just wanted to bring that point in. Tell you, brother, Akil.
Well, to your point about self-reflection, Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, he offers suggestion, and an exercise that he suggests is daily in the evening when you're lying down in bed before you go to sleep at night, to just take a few minutes to just do two things: to reflect on your day and reflect on your life. Right? Because sometimes, and this is me talking now, sometimes we're just moving, we just get so much into our mechanical flow, we just move forward without thinking about true self-improvement. Right? What did I get right today? What did I get wrong today? How can I do this better tomorrow? How can I make things more enhanced? Things of this nature. But I think if we take the advice of Ibn Qayyim and perform this particular exercise, that would assist us with that. And this also would place us on the path of the salaf, of the ancients, as they would review their lives and they would review their days on a daily basis, as they would say, "Yomun harun, yomun baridun." Today was a good day. Today was a bad day. Today was a hot day. Today was a cold day. They would do this. So this self reflection that you're speaking of is definitely something that we should do to assist us in our parenting. And included in that is, how were we as a parent today? How did I do today? How was I with my children? Did I acknowledge them? Do I know what's going on with them today or not? How was their school day? What's their social life like? Right? Instead of just kind of dealing with things in a reactionary fashion, as many parents do, as many parents will deal with an issue when it happens, right? Something happened, so now we're dealing with it, right? So we're reactionary, as opposed to being proactive. But even if we're being reactionary, at least minimally, we should attempt to be retroactive, right? To try to okay, let's look at everything that occurred to current, and then now let's pick it up from here and improve it and make it better. Go ahead,
And
Doctor.
that's key. What you've just said there, I think, is about being reactionary, proactive, is so key, because one of the things that we look to and we need to look to, and I think the three of us here are learning as parents, even though we may have a few children already and grandparents in some instance, but we've got to be careful. And this, I believe in this. This is something I think from my parents, and I will refer to that. Not that I said it specifically, but when I'm analyzing certain aspects, we need to make sure, and I tell my children this, I will not negotiate with you. I'm here to navigate. I'm here to navigate, not negotiate. And we're in a world now and what comes to mind is the hadith and the different meanings of the slave woman giving the woman giving birth to her master. And one of the explanations that Imam Nawawi brings in that hadith of Jibreel is the disrespect of the children to the mother, and how they treat the mother, almost so she becomes a slave to the child. That's one of the few explanations that are given to that particular hadith. And we see today, and I've seen it, some of you may be aware of that, you'll see young mothers, young fathers, the toddlers really playing up in the shop or the store, and they negotiate and sit down. If you do this, and they give them a sweet, or they try to pacify them. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying as the child is getting older, as they've learned that, I can do this, so I can throw a tantrum, I can behave in this particular way, because if I do that, it will yield this result. So for me, I believe that we've got to look at, and I'm just suggesting here, that with our children, we navigate as opposed to negotiate with them. And what do I mean by navigate? That means showing the direction. That means steering them. When we're driving a car, it's not just you in the car that's navigating and steering. You've got a whole family or people with you. You're all moving together. So that navigation is a movement together until they're at a stage where they can navigate and move off themselves. And I think that we've got to really consider that, because when we are negotiating, and some might say, well, why not negotiate with your children? What, negotiate for them to be good and have good behavior? Negotiate for them to be on the deen? Are we going to be negotiating with them and them seeing that this is negotiable? Being worshipping Allah, yes, there's no compulsion in religion, but it's not a negotiable contract. This is an obligation. Obedience to parents is not a negotiation, it's an obligation. So I think what I'm saying as I'm teasing this out is that we should not obfuscate, we should not obscure responsibilities, rights, things that are raw, that are obligatory upon the children, to those which are not obligatory upon the children. And we've got to navigate that in a way that we're not just giving them a set of laws and rules and regulations.
Okay, just to speak to the first point, then I'm gonna try to test the second point. The first point you was talking about was reflection. So let's put this in light of what we're talking about. So Dr. Abdul Haq Baker is suggesting that one of the tips for or solutions for good parenting is the parent being self-reflective. That self-reflection plays a greater role in helping rear the child, as far as good parenting. And all of that is backed, also can be backed by the Quran and Sunnah, because we are advised, as our brother Akil Ibn Qayyim was bringing, we are advised to take self accountability. And we're also taught that when things happen to us, as far as disrespect from the wife, as far as even the children, or something happen, a riding beast go down, and so forth and so on, we are to look inwardly as opposed to looking outwardly. So we are taught to reflect maybe on what we might have put forth that will cause this type of behavior to emanate in the first place, right? As opposed to, so that self-reflection is one of the good parenting tips. The second point that he's bringing here, about, for us to we can tie it into everything, as far as being a good parent, is this navigation thing. All right. So there is an obligation that must be, the role of the caretaker or the parent is to be the director. You have to get the directions, right? And you're saying that that direction shouldn't be compromised. Will you compromise it when you start making the child feel as though they have a say so in regards to obligatory matters, right? They don't. And I agree with you on that. But there is something that parents can do. We get it from our Salaf. We also get it from the Quran itself, how Allah deals with creation, and that is incentives. So you can give your children incentives. That doesn't go against, or that doesn't fall under what you're saying. That doesn't fall in negotiation. So if they're doing good, they should be rewarded.
Yes.
If they are not doing so good, then it should be a moment of reflection for them where consequences actually is met out, depending on their level, depending on their age, depending, what I'm saying? The things they learn, etc. So you go ahead, brother Akil.
Well, to your point, brother Nafis, we have examples of the ancients of the Salaf where many of them would begin allowing their children to sit in the circles of knowledge to begin the education process at 5 years old, right? 5 to 6 years old, as a starting point for that type of exposure. And it was just that exposure. They weren't necessarily expected to understand everything that was taking place, but just to become familiar with it. But the point here is, some of them mentioned about themselves as children that in the beginning, my father used to give me a dinar for every hadith that I memorized, right? In the beginning, my father used to give me, let's say for our purposes, a dollar, right? Or a British sterling. What do you guys say? You say 1 quid, right? What do you guys
pound.
say?
Quid is slang. A pound.
Okay.
Right? For every hadith that I learned, right? And my father continued to do that until I grew a love for hadith, right? Until I grew a love for prophetic tradition. So, right, incentive is something that is definitely established. And I'd like to add on and build on the point that Dr. Baker is making about being a navigator as opposed to a negotiator. And I'll add this. Um, we have to make a distinction as parents. And what do we have to separate? We have to separate between our personal feelings, our personal life experiences, and the child that is in front of us. I'll explain what I mean by that. Many times, as we're living with our children say something or do something, and that gives us a particular emotion, and then we respond to how we feel about what this child has said or done, as opposed to what is in the best interest of that child,
Mm.
regardless of how I
Right.
personally feel about it, right? Because the goal in raising children must be to prepare our children for the world that they will be entering into at the
Mm.
time that they are adults. And the goal isn't necessarily for them to was coddle our feelings, right? Or for them to be a duplicate of us, or for them to relive our lives, right? So
Mm.
now that we're living our lives vicariously through them for
Right.
the things that we didn't achieve to the level that we wanted to achieve, or with something that we want to relive, right? No, the focus should be on the child more so than it is on our own selves.
No, and I think it's a two-part fold with that. So one aspect, yeah, you're building them for the world that they're going to be living in, right? That's a secular aspect. That's the outer aspect dealing with life. But then there's the other aspect also that we have to remember. The main goal is we're still building them to be slaves of Allah. So that don't mean that they have to emulate us, but we still should. That should be at the forefront because that's what Allah Jalla talks about throughout the Quran. That's what the Prophet Sallallahu talks about,
That's
and
it.
it's important for them to understand that. And I think sometimes in our homes, I'm just talking about myself now. I'm not talking about, that connection has to be there. So yeah, I want you to be the best in this world. I want you to understand how you can, learn, get an education, get trade, etc., etc., etc. So you could be well off, But at the same time, how good would you be if you don't have that spiritual strength, that spiritual foundation, that connection with your Lord? You know what I'm saying? Which should be the ultimate thing, right? Because we was talking about capitalism last week, right? And you mentioned how that plays a part at you believe that fighting against or disconnecting that relationship between the parent and the child, right? But
Correct.
capitalism, if you really think about it, one of the main principles of capitalism and the reason why it can be looked at in a negative connotation, it's not always negative, first and foremost, right? There's some aspects that Islam actually agrees with capitalism, right? I know you might come at me. I'm playing double advocate
No,
here.
no,
Did a little
you're right.
research on this. So anyway, no, but just to say, self-preservation, right, is one of the key principles or one of the principles of capitalism, right? The self-preservation is something that is understood even in our deen. There are times where we have to worry about self-preservation or self-interest, right? Not the fact that on Yom Kippur, nafsi, nafsi, the hadith, not the fact that when Ramadan come or with our deen, we should be more personal. All of these things are self-preservation, right? Self-interest,
Yep. Capitalism, first law of nature,
right?
maqasid al-sharia, goals of the sharia,
There
right?
you
The
go, right?
preservation of self and life is right is
There
in the
you go.
forefront. So,
All
so
right.
go ahead.
So that is there. But the issue comes in now when they are self-preservation becomes where as though greed, thievery, everything else just to the benefit of yourself. Whether people are starving, whether people are not getting fair treatment, whether it's not just, it doesn't matter. As long as I profit, right? That becomes a problem. But with our children and with ourselves, I think that honestly we should at some point, realize what goes first. The spiritual goes before the physical. And if that is taught as strong as the education that we harp on our children, they will be better. Our children come into a lot of wealth. If they don't got a good heart, what are they gonna do with the wealth? They, you understand what I'm saying? I think
I
it's
do. And that's interesting, brother Nafis, because I agree with you, but we're seeing. I've got some challenges to throw out for us to look at, because just on that point you mentioned there, which I think is brilliant, we should nurture the spiritual. But what we find, and it happened to us how we came to Islam, in nurturing the spiritual, some will not taste the fruits of that because they don't understand it within the context of the environment, community, society they're living in. And we've seen some of our children, we've seen those who've been raised as Muslims, and they've left the deen, and I'm not advocating this, but they've gone into the physical, they've gone into the world and career, everything like this, and they've realized, like we did when we came to the deen, there was an emptiness that was gnawing at our souls. There was an emptiness there, and then we saw the deen, and that just completed everything for us. So I'm asking, this is one of my questions, so please hold this one. How far do we go to nurture our children spiritually if they cannot see its relevance to the dunya and contextualize it to the dunya in the way that it's pulling them? Okay, because that's what's happening. There's a disconnect with our children between the spiritual realm, deen, and with regards to the dunya and everything that is calling them, that beckoning. So should we be giving them a smattering fusion of the two while controlling that? And then this is where this comes in now. Now I'm going to get a little bit mischievous here, because then it comes to the point where what we see when we're looking at the latter aspect, not the spiritual aspect, is that we only have two evils. Often we have not a good and an evil from the dunya point. We have two evils. So we now have to say, do you know what? I have to take the lesser of the two evils. Last week, we touched upon what our children are listening to with regards to the music. I was really glad Brother Nafis spoke as he did, and you heard how because I'm not saying we listen or advocate music, but our children are in there. They're in the music. And when they're speaking to us and using slang or talking some language or code, and we've got no idea what they're talking about, does that make them think, oh, have compassion for Abby, I need to explain to him? What it means is, I can go deeper into this because I can get into the world I want to get into, and he will not have a clue what I'm doing. So what do we have to do? We have to be cognizant, conversant with where they're going, with what they're doing before they fall deeper into it. So the point I'm making, I'm not advocating music. Brother Nafis and myself said that last week. There may be, for example, they're talking about the Matrix. When it was before, they're talking about particular movies, they're talking about particular things here, and we, like some of the brothers and sisters that I know, haram, 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 they can't do it, no TV in the home, everything. If you see where their children are now, not in every case, I said, okay, why didn't you engage with them? Because as you're watching, you know where there's subliminal message, not anything illicit, don't get me wrong, but there may be a very popular movie that's out there, like we saw Black Panther was out there, and we had some brothers, no, black nationalism, no. Watch the movie and talk about the cultural aspects there. Talk about the nuances that are in there. Show them that you know this. This is just being repackaged in the 21st century context, but it's something that's being recycled. And yes, there are positives to it. Yes, you can be proud of being who you are as a black person, because sadly, our communities, we've seen many with this drive that we are colorless. And I'm good. Don't get me started on this now. But some saying that going on like we're colorless. We become to the Sunnah. We're Muslims now, and every other cause is okay. But any black cause, oh no, brother, this is nationalism. Sister, this is nationalism. No, we can show we are proud to be who we are and where we come from, and the characteristics, the positive characteristics that are there, and to warn against the nihilistic characteristics, which are the ones that are pulling our children with the gangster rap and everything like that. We need to show the positive side that, yeah, black excellence exists. This is how it exists, but it can exist with us not relying on this. We rely on the deen. So I'll stop at this point. Everything you said, Brother Nafis, I think is excellent, and I'm with you on that. However, I'm saying that the spiritual side, we have to focus on that, but it needs to be within a context of the dunya that is pulling our children, so they can see, they can relate to, okay, if there's an absence of this, this is what happens in the dunya. If there's a presence of this, this is how it can be negotiated or navigated, in the dunya. And that sometimes we parents have to choose between two evils, and obviously take the lesser of the two evils, and not go back to, well, no, me as a Muslim who's on this principle, I will not do this. And so therefore, if my son is going down this path, or my daughter's going down this path, she's got her headphones on, she's listening to music, then she has to get out of the house because I don't listen to music. It's haram. I don't care what it's doing to her. And we make that break because we're thinking about ourselves. we're thinking about our paradigms. We're not thinking about theirs and what they need from us and how we need to be close to them, understanding to move them away from that. We need to be with them to move them away.
Can I say one thing, Akil, before you go in? I want to speak to this point. First and foremost, the origin for parenthood in Islam is that we direct them and we educate them for a connection to their Lord. That has to be the foundation. Unfortunately, I know it sounds dogmatic. I know it sounds repetitious. I know it sounds like a little bit how you saying with people being so harsh on the extreme on one end, and I'm not caring about how my children interact with the world or the present day world again. That's not what I'm suggesting here. What I'm saying is that they have to view the world via spirituality, via Islam, not the other way around.
Right.
A lot of our children don't view the world Islamically because they're not being taught that. You understand what I'm saying? It's not being taught on that level. A lot of us have become lazy as parents, myself included. We allow everything else. Okay, if you want to call it the matrix, we have to unplug. I'm going to say some stuff that people not going to agree with right now, and I'm going to use some verses that actually shows you this. You're probably not going to agree, but we have to unplug. That's just reality. The society to order back to combat what they're doing. The devices are not bad in and of themselves.
No.
Right? But leaving them unmonitored, what they watch is raising them. It's cultivating them. And if they don't have something strong, such as spirituality, to know how to combat it,
right,
to look at it, right, then we are leaving them at risk,
yes,
at a greater risk. And we see some of the conflicts of it. So when you go back, right, I'm going to give you some scenarios. When you go back to Ibrahim alayhi salam, notice his wording with his father.
Yes.
Right? His father was carving the idols. This was a society that was pushing idolatry. You understand this is where he was living at, right? Instead of changing the society that he was at, what did he do? This is real time stuff. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to try to fight against the system, I'm going to try to fight against this overwhelming system, what did he do at the end? He advised them, okay, he did what he had to do, he commanded good, rid the evil, but what did he say after his father told him, you know, I'm going to get rid of you? He says, well, I am going to withdraw from you. I'm going to refrain from you. I'm going to seclude myself away from you. You understand? And that which you worship besides Allah. And he says that what? I'm going to do what? I'm going to call to my Lord. Right? And perhaps that my Lord do not find me ungrateful or, you know, unblessed with my invocation. So then Allah says, so when they turned away from them, Allah reward them. Do you see? When they withdrew away from them, this is their society was in idolatry.
Right.
We are in a crazy society now. Let's go to the people of Kaf now. The people of Kaf, what happened?
Withdrew.
What did they do? The same exact thing, right? Right? They come in. Right? They withdrew. But look at the onslaught of the people that they was going to deal with in that society. Allah says later on, إنهم إن يظهروا عليكم يرجموكم أو يعيدوكم في ملتهم. Right? So if they was to return back to those people, right, they will find that if they was to gain victory over them, what was going to happen? They was going to either stone you, or they was going to either try to push you towards their way. We have to realize that everything, mostly in the society that we live in, is calling us away from what we believe.
Right.
You have to understand that. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm with you. And I think we're saying the same thing because
I'm with you. But what I'm saying is that spirituality needs to be the first thing. That's what
it has to be the first because that's the start point.
That's the start.
It cannot be isolation. It cannot be an isolation from the reality.
No, but before you start worrying about the dunya, they can't interact with the dunya without the spiritual lens.
Yes, absolutely.
They're going to be suffocated. So instead of us worrying about integration, because that's normally what we're doing, we're worrying about integrating into the society that we live in. That's why we involve ourselves with everything they tell us to involve ourselves with. Every new Jones that's out there, we on it. Our children is on it. The parents are on it, right? But we're not even taking the time out to see where Islam stands at with it.
Mm.
and we are harming ourselves and them by jumping on every new Jones that actually might be orchestrated according to what Akil was saying last week. It might be by design. So that
Yes.
overwhelming system is destroying us because we're not looking at it from another way. I'm just that's just my thoughts on
Mm.
it. Yeah, I gotta play devil's advocate with you, brother.
Well,
Akil.
let me jump in here, and the first thing is this. So, um, I agree with what you're saying, Nafis. What I would also say is that that's subjective and it's relative, and different families may have to utilize different options. Um, let's take, for example, Yunus alayhi salam. He attempted to withdraw.
Mm.
That didn't work out that well.
That's right.
He had
That's
to go back. He had to integrate and figure it out, right? And by way of his doing that, his people are the only people that we know of in human and prophetic history that were set to be destroyed,
right.
and they were not destroyed, and they all embraced the faith of Islam, right?
SubhanAllah.
Um,
Naam.
because of going in and not going away, right? So for some this may work, for some that may work.
Mm.
I do think what we need to look at though is historically, and I know there's some examples of this in Britain as well, of different groups, regardless of faith or non-faith. Some groups do this for secular reasons. Those faiths, or excuse me, those groups that have chosen to withdraw from the societies that they live in and attempt to create their own world separate from the larger nation,
Mm.
right? And look at how that worked out for most of them. Most of them it
Right.
didn't, right? Most of them it didn't. It just ended horribly for a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
But along with this, I just want to insert here that when we're speaking to, let's say, um, Dean versus Dunya, right? And to answer Dr. Baker's question, it's not necessarily a choice that we have to choose one, Dean versus Dunya, and if we choose, let's say, Dunya, we're no longer spiritual. It's not necessarily that, right? There actually is a coalescence at a high level of spirituality. And I say that, for example, within prophetic tradition, we find that the most beloved person to Allah is the individual who has knowledge and wealth, who has both, right? Not one without the other. And of course, when we say knowledge, meaning that knowledge that is acted upon, the practice of your spirituality and your piety, your devotion to Allah, coupled with wealth and utilizing that wealth appropriately, Allah loves that,
Mm.
right? For example, the ability to pay zakat is a pillar of our faith, right? You need some dunya to be able to practice that level of spirituality,
Right.
right? How many times do we come across different verses that are encouraging us to strive for Allah's cause with ourselves and our wealth?
Mm.
How are you striving for Allah's cause spiritually with your wealth if you ain't got none, right? So there should be a coalescence that is here, and by this coalescence, what I mean by this is the proper understanding of zuhud, the proper understanding of asceticism that we should be instilling within our children, and the proper understanding of asceticism or zuhud. When we say turn away from the life of this world, or when we say worldly abstinence, this really doesn't give it its proper due, right? Um, for example, true asceticism is when we are in a situation when we have a choice between this life and the hereafter, then we choose the hereafter over this life in that scenario.
Mm.
To the exclusion of that, we take both, right? We're actually striving for two paradises, the paradise in this life as well as the paradise of the hereafter, right? If that is something that is possible, right? So this asceticism, it is to leave off everything that doesn't benefit in the hereafter and to focus the heart on that which is with Allah, right? As Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala has mentioned. And to leave off that which doesn't benefit in the hereafter doesn't mean I'm not involved in the world. I don't have anything worldly. It just means that you are repurposing or properly purposing the world that you do have, right? So whatever you have of the world, it is in your hand and not in your heart. And this is one of the reasons why, when we look at the best of the companions of the 100,000 of them, as Ibn Hajar mentions, the 100,000 of them, the best 10 of them, when we look at their qualities, overwhelmingly, the majority of that 10, they were wealthy, but they purposed that wealth through spirituality.
Right.
And then that was one of the reasons that granted them the level that they had. So again, what I'm suggesting is instilling in our children a coalescence between the two, and then properly purposing it through
Spiritually,
a spiritual lens.
yes.
No, I think you.
Real quick, hold on.
Go ahead.
Just to say that we're pretty much saying the same thing, Akil. Basically, I'm not talking about total withdrawal. When I brought those verses up, it was showing you how Allah praises that actually. So if Allah praises it, it's definitely good. It's showing you that when it comes to a head and it's overwhelming with a society, there are certain steps which the Quran actually acknowledges. And I'm not saying that in its proper context. But to be honest with you, all of these things that you mentioned as far as dunya, it need to be governed by taqwa Allah. Just as they explain about zuhud being a wara'. Wara' is taqwa Allah. So if you really look at asceticism, right, and a person practicing withdrawal and stuff like that, obstinance, it has to be fear of Allah. Fear of Allah takes ilm of Allah, right? It's going to take that knowledge. So the foundation still have to be spiritual. A lot of our children don't have a battle, and a lot of us don't have a battle because we're not grounded spiritually.
No.
And we are not governing our actions spiritually. When you look at the ahkam, right? Ahkam al-buyur, buying and selling. Many of us are doing trade and business right now. We don't know nothing about ahkam or selling. We don't know nothing about Islam and what it says. That's not governing ourselves by Islam. Many of us are dealing in siyasa, politics. We know nothing what Islam says about that. Many are dealing in agriculture. Many are dealing in renting. All of our lives are not governed by Islam. So if it's not governed by Islam, right, then how can we say we are practicing the taqwa of Allah here, right? Why did Allah send down those rules? Why did the Prophet ﷺ instruct us on those things? This is how we fear Allah, when we govern ourselves through those things. So yes, we're supposed to be in the dunya interacting, but we're supposed to interact with Allah being at the head. We're supposed to interact with Allah governing us. A lot of our children ain't doing that. And we are losing them, and we are losing ourselves because we're not doing that. We take and put Islam at the back burner, man. That's what we do. We take Islam, put it in the back burner, and then we keep trying to figure out how the kuffar ways is always the best way, or how we can integrate it with it, wrap it around it, and then we say our children need this, and it's killing us. No, Islam is the answer. It's the solution. Make it that. You understand what I'm saying? Make it that. And then actually you can teach your children to love that.
I think what you're saying, but speaking to that, Nafis, very important. I think everything here, mashallah, that it all fits comprehensively, but they're all in different components. So the understanding that we need to have, again, coming back to the adult reflective stage, because we are given an understanding, or we took that understanding, and even some of the students of knowledge that came over, that the Islam that we practice has to be apparent, pervasive, and controlling even our local environment. And if it's not doing that, then there's a deficiency in our implementation of Islam. That's not the case. What needs to be looked at is that Islam is practiced. You mentioned the verse last week, Nafis, and there was another one similar, that Allah tells us, fear Allah as much as you can. And so therefore the practice of Islam, your degree may be different to mine, Akil, okay? Because you're able to do more on an individual basis spiritually than I'm able to do more. Maybe I'm just not at that level. Maybe there are constraints where if I practice in that particular way, or that aspect of the deen or the spirituality that I want to practice, like in the UK, for example, al-uzla, as some are calling that they're doing isolation, is now being looked at as non-violent extremism. Okay, so when you're pulling yourself back with al-usla and saying, "Oh, I want to take myself off to the street tree and bite on the bark of a tree and everything like this," this is now within the context of This al-uzla is now in the context of extremism, and you get targeted, and your family gets targeted, and you can't progress in society. So in that instance, you have to say to yourself, if I go to that extreme there because I don't want to engage with the society, it's going to affect me and my persona and everything around me and my family. So I need to engage or participate, even if it's I'm going to the local shop to work in the store 9 to 5, because I have to engage. But I've got my spirituality in check in that area. So these areas here are very important to say. Just because it's not work, the community is not functioning as a little mini Sharia hub, doesn't mean now in our own individual lives that we can't implement various aspects of the deen. And that's been done through the ages, where there's been societies where it's predominantly non-Muslim, which is a new reality, but there may be oppression. There may be, we've seen with the scholars even, there were the cases of Ijma Sukuti and Ijma Qawli because of the oppression and the times that were actually there. So we need to weigh these things up individually in our own personal context, not be looking at a community to be leading that charge and then basically sitting back because they're not leading that charge. No. As Nafis is saying, there is that element of individual spirituality. And what you said is right, Nafis. I'm going to stop at this point. One thing that happened in our communities, and I saw that and felt that, we shunned spirituality. We went to the polar opposite because we saw anything spiritual as being Sufi. We saw anything with regards to, when you look at volume 8 of Bukhari, and it talks about the raqa'iq and everything, everyone suddenly thinks he's being gay, for want of a better phrase, or he's being weird. So I'll listen to him and say, yeah, look, doing these things and then when we speak, I remember speaking to a brother, good brother, mashallah, and I was saying, look, the Sufis are on Dalala, but they keep talking about spirituality, and we're on the other end of the spectrum where we're not talking about spirituality. Then you've got the Takfiris who are at an extreme, but they look balanced because they say we love the Ummah and we want to do this. We're fighting for the Ummah and everything. And then you've got us who are not talking about the Ummah. You've got us who are not talking about spirituality. We're talking harshness. We're talking about writing people off. We're talking about disdain for people. And we're the ones who end up looking extreme. And the brother came back to me and said, yeah, I disagree with that, because you know what? At least we've translated some books of Ibn al-Qayyim. I was like, subhanallah, is that it? Is that your answer? That we've translated books of Ibn al-Qayyim? Okay, have you absorbed what Ibn al-Qayyim has said? Have you looked at what he's been saying with regards to raqa'iq and everything? We neglected these aspects. So when we're talking about spirituality, I think that's something that we really need to traverse in totality, because we have grown in the deen and there's been a deficiency of hard-heartedness because we have not let the spirituality, and we don't use these words much, the spirituality has not been absorbed nor comprehended for what it is, because it should change us. After salah, it's like you've washed yourself, you've cleaned yourself. When we say ana uhibbuk fillah, it's not just a statement. What does that actually mean? What do these spiritual aspects mean? The dhikr that we're doing, is it just mechanical? The prayer that we're doing, is it just mechanical? I've just did the khutbah today, mashallah, and it was about the Isra wal Miraj. And as I was giving the khutbah, I stopped and I said, subhanallah, we're all sitting here now, and the prayer was prescribed in Jannah, in paradise. It came. This is the only order that came from paradise. And yet we neglect our prayer. The Prophet ﷺ kept coming back until it was reduced to 5 salawat, which is a reward of 50. He told Musa, I'm too shy to go back to my Lord. He petitioned for his ummah, and we're like, oh yeah, do the salah, khalas, it's finished. And we're thinking about other things. Where is the spirituality of our communities? And if they were there, we would move mountains. You'd see the change in our children, in ourselves, in the wider facilities and environments that we live, because that's how Islam spread before. People saw the akhlaq, the spirituality, the behavior of the Muslims. Yes, some say they buy the sword. That was just an aspect of it. Others were traders, businessmen traveling around the world. Their devotion, they would say, oh, then why has he just stopped his trade? And he's put the cloth over and he's gone to pray and he's just standing in the corner there praying melodic with a beautiful voice. Spirituality. And our communities and we people of Sunnah need to return to that on our individual levels and collective levels.
And hold on real quick, Akil. What you just said, you just put it, you explained it eloquently that I couldn't explain it. So people don't understand. Yes, we know the ayah. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. Well, another ayah, Allah said, لَا تَنْسَى مِن نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا. We're not saying that. Nothing that I'm indicating is saying in these verses, oh Allah, give me good in this life, good in the next life. And the other verse, don't forget your portion. It's nothing I'm saying is telling you that don't interact with the dunya. That's not what I'm indicating here.
No, that's
And you
right.
just
Yeah.
eloquently put it there. I'm saying that we have something to help us interact with the dunya and help us protect us from a lot of the stuff the dunya is going to throw at us, and that is our spirituality. And if we don't take that, because that's what the Quran is telling us, that's what the Sunnah is telling us. So I'm saying, like, if the Quran and the Sunnah is telling us it is the solution, how can we overlook that? That's what I'm saying. It's not saying don't take nothing from the dunya, don't be successful. You just mentioned something very good. You know what you mentioned? You said that the companions and you said that the Salaf themselves, they was tradesmen, they was businessmen, it was all of that. They had wealth. You know what we're taught? When we put Allah first, spirituality again, what does the dunya does? It's a secret. Let me get here and mention it. It comes at you what? Willingly or unwillingly, right?
Right.
You're going to get the good of this life. And another point I want to mention before I stop. Shaykh Taymiyyah comment on a verse in Surah An-Nahl, right? There's a verse where Allah Jalla wa'ala talks about فَلَنَحْيَنَّ حَيَاةَ طَيِّبَةً, right? Giving you a good life. Shaykh Taymiyyah comment, he says, notice Allah didn't say he's going to give you this, something for materialistic from the world. He didn't consider that to be a good life. You know what I mean? So what do Allah meant when he says, when you're hayat tayyibah? You having that iman in your heart, as Shaykh Uthaymeen mentioned. You having that goodness, that contentment in your heart, right? These are the things you're going to have. Making right decisions, distinguish between what's beneficial versus what's harmful, which our children need to know.
Right.
You understand? My friend down the street, he want me to go take a ride with him. The car might not be legal. He might be having an illegal weapon in the car. You know what I'm saying? If my son is not nourished properly, right? And this is a scenario that happened to me. My son got a case right now because he didn't make the right decisions to say,
May
you know
Allah
what?
aid him.
Huh?
May Allah aid him and may Allah aid
No,
you.
he didn't make the right decision to say, you know what? I'm not going to ride in that car. But if he was grounded spiritually and he had the right decision to know what was beneficial and what was not, he would have said, you know what? I see y'all another time. I catch y'all later. You understand? I'm not going to get in that car with you. You see, I'm not going to subject myself to that. But that's the problem. They don't have nothing to fight the dunya with.
And yes.
The dunya.
And you know what? And we train as you're on point. And before Akil, I'm going to throw it over to you. Just one very simple thing. We get a reminder every single day about the spirituality preceding, but being a part of the dunya. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala al-falah. The adhan and the iqama every day, 5 times a day. If we just, you know what, maybe we need to sit with our children and say, let's just go through the adhan and the iqama. You say the iqama every day. What does it say? It says, come fast to prayer.
Yeah.
Then the next one is for success. Prayer, success. Success in the dunya and the akhirah.
There you go.
In the dunya. So we need to really grab onto the spirituality, as I was saying before. And I think we're all saying the same thing and coming from different vantage points. And make sure that the spirituality is understood to be entwined and and running with the dunya. Because without the spirituality, you go astray in the dunya. Without the spirituality, everything you're doing in the dunya will be lost. Because when the dunya ends, you're in the grave facing the akhirah. And you've done nothing for the akhirah. And the only things you can do for the akhirah are spiritual. Sadaqah is a spiritual implication behind it. Feeding your family, going work to halal work. It's intangible, spiritual.
It's all connected.
Investment that you are giving to the akhirah. This is how they're intertwined.
Yeah, it's all connected. And we all saying the same thing. Go ahead, brother Akil.
Yeah, I really only have one thought to what you both are saying. And really is to Dr. Baker's point in your conversation with that particular brother and him responding with, well, we've translated words of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. If we are entering into the depths of Aqidah the depths of theology, which is really matters of the heart extending into the outward, and our perception of our existence and our relationship with our Lord. If that doesn't bring us into spirituality, what we doing, right?
Right.
If we're entering into tafsir of the Quran, and this is the speech of Allah that we're striving to get nearer to, if being near to Allah's speech doesn't impact spirituality, what we doing, right? We enter into hadith and in sciences. This is prophetic tradition, and the goal is to be as near to the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as possible, right? If that ain't spiritual, what we doing, right?
Right.
If we talking about sharia and fiqh, usul fiqh, right? We're talking about these things, right? If we're talking about law and jurisprudence and in legal theory, these are the laws as revealed to us by our Lord. If understanding that, getting near to that, doesn't impact our heart, I I just think we missed the boat.
Right.
You
I
know.
want to say one thing just to tie everything up because I know we got to go. Some helpful directives as far as the solution for good parenting. One, again, we touched on it last week, but this week I want to touch on it. Is one, selecting a good mate, helping you out. I mean, you know what I mean. Ibn al-Qayyim has a nice book where he talks about the corruption of the children mostly come from the parents, especially the father in question. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, selecting a good mate. So that's one of the rights that your child has over you by getting a good mate, so they can be cultivated good, right? Also, with selecting a good mate, choosing a good name, right? Seeking refuge with Allah Jalla wa ala from the shaitan influencing your child at the time of conception or intercourse, right? And I know there's this textbook what I'm saying, but these things are in play, right? Being a good role model. These are some good solutions. You talked about that earlier with self-reflection, thinking about certain those things like that. Also, there are three things which are mentioned from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when it comes to our children. And he mentioned in the hadith, Muru abna'akum bis salat or as-salat bis sab'ah, right? Command your children, with the prayer at the age of 7, right? So prayer is an integral part of not only the parent being a good parent by, commanding the child to do it. It also shapes the child. You understand? It's also an integral part of developing discipline within the child, structure within the child, a connection with the Creator. You know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera. Then he mentioned something else in that hadith. Separate them at the age of 10, right? So you separate them, the sexes, right? Showing that there is a distinction between both man and girl, right? Then the Prophet said, discipline them at the age of 10 before separation. He said, discipline them, whether they woo him, right? And the Sheikh Uthaymeen mentioned that you don't beat them. It's to adab. It's to discipline them. It's not that I'm beating you, I'm hitting you. You know what I'm saying? That's not what it's for. It's not a punishment, right? It is a disciplinary action. It is to make them see that this is a benefit for them. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that as far as good parenting goes, prayer is at the top, right? Advice, giving our children advice. Abdul Haq, you talked about this earlier. Sitting down, talking to them about the Adhan. But anything you want to talk to them about, whether it's about Islam or whatever, give them advice. If you look at the prophets, they gave their children advice, right? Even if you look at Luqman, he was advising his son, right? So give advice. That's something good. Let them see that you actually care and concerned. Another thing for solution of what we say in advice, righteous action. We said dua. We said being a good role model, right? So another thing of good parenting, right, is also being aware of your child. And Dr. Haq, I think you was talking about this earlier, right? Knowing your child, talking to your child, you know what I'm saying? Having discussions with your child so that you can be aware. Whereas you're not friends with your child on the sense that we're now equal, we negotiate, but we can be aware of each other. My child view is being shaped. All right. The development. The psychologists, they say that the brain don't fully develop until the age 25 to 29, right? In their studies, right? So the child at certain ages are sponges. So their mind is still growing. They're asking you questions. They're acquisitive. Enter their world. But at the same time, try to teach them some values that they can actually take with them. as far as being good parents. That's what I wanted to bring that in, so that we can, tie everything with the topic. Inshallah.
Yeah, my final thought, you just reminded me, Nafis, is the statement of one of the Sahaba, and I forget whether it was Umar or Abdullah ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with the both of them. And they mentioned that for the first 7 years of your child's life, play with them. And for the second 7 years of your child's life, educate them. And for the third 7 years of your child's life, befriend them. Right. And this brings them all the way to 21.
Alhamdulillah. Nah. And you said adolescent go up to 23 now, right?
Adolescence
right.
into the 23. That's correct.
Abdul Haki, you said something earlier about extremism, right? As far as they look at as non-violent extremism when you practice Uzla, right? It's funny though, right? I mean, just not to be a conspiracy theorist, but you notice how they attack us if we try to withdraw from their system, right?
Yes.
If we try to withdraw, and we have seen cases, and I heard news where individuals don't want to abide by the law as far as they want to use solar light. They don't want to use Pico, right? So they arrest them. Like they call people living off the grid, so to speak. It's like 400 people living off the grid. So I guess that these companies, they like, look, we need you in this system that we got play. So you're actually disrupting the organization. I mean, you're disrupting the company, disrupting the goal that we have if you leave. So it's not extremism Islamically.
No.
Uzla is not extremism Islamic.
No, it's not at all.
The society that we live in, they were actually, and I look at that, so just to speak to that point, I look at that like how we got to look at taxes. Sheikh Tamim was explaining that it was going to cause the guy, the armed guard to come in and take you and lock you up. You got to, you're going to have to play ball. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So pretty much you got to play ball. So if you're going to be here, sort of what you were saying to Haq about the ayat, if you're going to be in this society and you have to live in this society, realistic, then you have to, فَتَقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah as much as you are able. You know what I'm saying? And let your children know that, they got to play ball and they got to fear Allah as much as they're able, because it could cause harm to your family, like you said.
That's right.
And it's not out of hikmah to say, you know what, I'm just going to withdraw from everybody and this is what it's going to be. And last but not least, let's remember is important. The Prophet ﷺ said, Bada Islam ghariban sayaudu kama bada qariban fatuba lil ghuraba alladhina yuslihuna idha fasada an-nas. Right? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned in two different narrations, or the same narration, he mentioned that, Islam started off as something strange. It should return back to being something strange. And Tuba is given to the Ghuraba, right? Ibn Qayyim said the Ghuraba here is Ghurabatu Deen, which is worse than Ghurabatu Watan, right? Being a stranger of a different country, all right, this is worse than that. This is being a stranger within your deen and your practice of your deen. Because being a stranger in your country, you can get the sahaba back. You can get that back. You can get friends and family and loved ones. But with being a stranger in deen, you can't. If everybody is practicing something crazy in your society and you try to be on the straight and narrow, that could be a little bit, you know what I'm saying? That's testing. So,
and that's a key thing you said there, just to add on. Would like you to elaborate.
The last part. And then he says that the Ghuraba is those who rectify the situation when the people become corrupt. That's
right. And Nafis, I'm going to come back to you and Akil, because this is a really important narration that you've given, because we've seen some amongst us take that narration and make themselves strange. The hadith doesn't say make yourself strange. It says Islam will return as a stranger, tuba lil ghuraba, for the strangers. So then we had individuals amongst us making themselves strange, and you're saying, brother, you can't practice like that here. This is going to draw attention. And then they would chastise you and me to say, you're not like us. You're not of the Ghuraba. You are not of the Salaf. We are strange. And you would see it in the attire, the glare, the behavior, the sisters, the shidda that is there. And they're saying, and all they would say is, Tuba lil Ghuraba. This is not.
We're not supposed to be weirdos.
Yeah, the abstract. That's the abstract stuff we was talking about. The Horma abstract knowledge. That's
there you
that's
go.
what that is. Ibn Taymiyyah already said that. If a society is one way, you don't walk around with like a yellow something that sticks you out, that makes you the eyeball. It's like, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna look weird to the people. You don't. You know what I'm saying? You still stay in the flow and the harmony of society.
Yeah, we're not supposed. Right. Yeah, we're not supposed to be weirdos, right? That's not what's meant.
Exactly.
And we also have something called shuhra, ahla shuhra. Like the people that are looking to stand out or go against the grain purposefully, and this is something that is deplorable within our faith.
No, so last but not least, brothers and sisters, like I said, parenting is a hard job. You don't stop rectifying yourself, as Brother Baker started off real nice. I like that point that he brought as far as reflection. So let's realize that parenting is a hard job, right? But we have to realize that we don't have to negotiate with our children. Sort of what he brought to Athar, be a friend with them 7 years, and at the later stage, play with them at the younger stage, and in that in between stage, you educate them. You teach them. So this should be your role with the children. So good parenting is actually honing on all of that and taking in reflection. If your child behaves certain type of way, look inwardly. Look inwardly. Realize what you may or may not be doing.
Remember the Salaf
What you may
to
not be
prove
doing.
on the point you said there, the
Yeah.
Salaf, when they used to return from travel and they'd see that their home and their family were in disarray, then they would reflect on the sins and the transgressions or something mistakes they made to have returned and seen their family in this way. So
Yeah.
exactly speaking to that point, brother Nafis, yes, absolutely, we do have to reflect. And wala uqsimu bin nafsin lawama.
There you go. There you go. So it is a hard job, alhamdulillah, especially living here. Also, remember the ayat, like Brother Hawk brought, so we don't be abstract here. We don't be crazy as far as thinking that we can just totally withdraw. They ain't gonna let you withdraw from their society anyway. And then on top of that, going extreme, thinking that, well, we can just cut off from our children, and if they go crazy, we don't have to deal with them or worry about what they're going through, like you were saying earlier. Whereas, okay, if my child is going through all of this fitna, then I don't need to worry about it because he's being rebellious. Right? But there is a level where you do have to draw the line. And y'all talked about it earlier. Our love can cause us to lose out. It can become a harm to us. And that give you that verse where Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu inna min azwajikum wa awladikum right? Aduwallakum fahdharuhum. In that verse, Ibn Abbas, and the reason for that verse is to explain it to you that there was the time when the Prophet was saying, he was coming. How many companions was getting ready to come, and there was some other groups, from the Hajj that wanted to leave, but their children and their wives was advising them, like, don't this, and that. So Allah was saying that they can be an enemy for you. Ibn Abbas was saying that, meaning not from the perspective of wrong, is the love that you have for them can
That's
cause
right.
you to go against the obedience of Allah. You understand? So it's sort of like the ayat where Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tulhikum amwalakum wa awladakum. Don't let your children or your wealth distract you. So they can become a distraction that way. And our love sometimes is like that, right? A mom will go to bat for her child, even if the child is wrong.
Right.
Not acknowledging that the child is actually wrong. So you have to be able to distinguish that so that you can draw that line. You understand?
Exactly.
If the child is wrong, you have to acknowledge that the child is wrong. Don't compromise your standards because that child is wrong. And I'm not telling you to jump up and throw the child out, right? I'm not telling you not to deal with the child at all. I'm saying to you is that you have to be strong and firm. If that child wants to be a renegade or be a gangster or something like that, he's bringing guns inside your home, and you know this, stop acting like you're turning a blind eye. If you know your child is into that type of stuff, then always surround them, always envelop them with dua. Keep making dua for them, never stop that. But don't enable him. Don't be an enabler.
Exactly.
You understand? So
not to negotiate, to navigate.
Yeah. No, so alhamdulillah, there wasn't really too many questions. People was making statements. They was agreeing with all of us. I like some of the statements that were made. So it wasn't really too many questions here. There was people making statements on it. The children are likely to rebel. This is why eating together. I like this point right here that the sister brought. Let's put this up here. This is why eating meals together, having no technology days, and individual time with each child is important. That's something to think about. You might want to incorporate that within your household.
Especially that individual time with each child. That's very important, as opposed to being with them as a group. That's very important.
Right? No, go ahead. I'm with you. No,
that was it. I was just highlighting that. That's it.
I was just highlighting. Okay, all right. We good?
We're good. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was the 9th episode of the Fajr Club. Inshallah ta'ala, next week will be the 10th and final episode of season 1. And inshallah ta'ala, season 2, we have some more good things for you guys. We'll be moving on to the mature stage by next week, inshallah. And jazakallah khair for everyone who participated in comment. Like we said, let's make dua for one another. Inshallah ta'ala that we get it right. I thank you guys for coming on. This is your host, Nafis Abu Zaid.
This is your brother Aqil Ingram.
And this is your brother Abdul Haq Baker.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.